Well, here we are, Corporate Services Committee. I'd like to call the meeting to order. I will look for disclosures of pecuniary interest from members of the committee. Seeing none, I will move on to the consent items. We have two. The first one is the appointment to the Joint Venture Management Committee for the Fort Pat Arena Complex. The second is the annual reporting on of lease financing agreements. Any questions about those? Councillor Zaveman, look like you're moving them. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Van Holst, any discussion on those two items? Councillor Van Holst, go ahead.
Sure, just a question about, I see that because our titles change, not our titles, but our staff titles change, and then we need to change various agreements. How often does that happen?
Mr. Coxhead.
I used to sit on this committee. It's happened once in the last 6 or 8 years where we had a name adjustment. It doesn't happen very often.
Any other questions about those items? It's been moved and seconded. Okay, let's open up the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Brings us to schedule items, of which there are none. Items for direction, we have one there, Federation of Canadian Municipalities Standing Committees. Councillor Ridley's been accepted to be a member of the Standing Committee at FCM, which is great. Joining Councillor Morgan, who's on the board. Is there a mover for that? Councillor Zaveman, Councillor Morgan. Discussion, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just very briefly, I think it's great that not only do we have Councillor Morgan serving as on the board with FCM, but we now have another one of our councillors serving on the standing committees. I know that was something I got to do in my first couple of years on council, and having representation there in not just one individual, but two, and is going to be tremendous for our efforts on a national scale. So it's great to see that Virginia will be doing this as well.
Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you. And of course, our councillors don't have a huge budget, so this would be a substantial percentage of that, these traveling costs. So it makes sense that we cover those from another source.
Any other speakers? Councillor Morgan.
Yes, so I'm very happy to have Councillor Ridley chosen to serve on FCM committees. I also do know the committees that we're serving on, which I'd be happy to share with colleagues today. Councillor Ridley has been appointed to the Standing Committee on Community and Safety Crime Prevention, the Standing Committee on Increasing Women's Participation in Municipal Government, the Standing Committee on Municipal Infrastructure and Transportation Policy, and she serves on the committee as a whole. I myself have been appointed to the committee as a whole, the Standing Committee on Conference Planning, the Standing Committee on Environmental Issues and Sustainable Development, Standing Committee on Social Economic Development, and I am Vice Chair of the Election Readiness Committee for the 2019 federal election, and I serve on the Ontario Regional Caucus as well. So between the two of us, as well as Mayor Joanne Vanderheyden, we have representation on pretty much every committee from Southwestern Ontario, so that will be, I think, very good for the region as a whole.
It's been moved and seconded. Let's open up the vote.
Closing the vote, that motion carries 5-0.
Brings us to deferred matters, additional business. The deferred matters list is there. Perhaps I could look for a mover for that. Councillor Zaveman, seconder. Councillor Morgan, any discussion on the deferred matters? Let's open that up.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Any additional business? Seeing none, that brings us to the confidential session. We have 5 items on the agenda. The first three are land acquisition related with solicitor-client privilege advice. There's one that's labor relations, employee negotiations, solicitor-client privilege advice, and a second one that is on the same type of matter. Motion to do that. Councillor Van Holst, seconded by Councillor Morgan. Thank you. I believe we'll be in committee room 3, and I suspect since there was no additional business, we'll adjourn from that committee room.
Councillor Hubert? Thank you. Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay, we're off to committee room 3.